Hey everyone, welcome to this very important discussion on the Wildlife Protection Act amendments proposed recently by the government. I'm Samir. I'm from the Rainmatter Foundation, and we are focused on climate change as a larger umbrella of issues, and as part of that, conserving what we have, making sure our commons actually expand and are protected at the very least is a very big part of this. So we have started this series of conversations in partnership with Vidhi around understanding what legal protection we have, how do we interpret amendments and laws that get proposed, and what teeth do these does the law give to people working in the space. Today we have with us Devaditya from Vidhi. He has been very active in researching the intersection of ecology, law, policy. He's a recipient of the Sanctuary Wildlife Award, and he will be leading us through this discussion. Prerna Bindra is a conservationist, and she has been part of the Standing Committee for the National Board of Wildlife earlier in 2010-2013, and on Uttarakhand's Wildlife Advisory Board as well. So along with Dev, she will actually be helping us understand the context of the laws, what the amendments proposed are for, what do they mean, and what we need to change as we look at the future ahead. Over to you, Dev. Why don't you introduce the topic and take it over?
Thank you, Samir, and thank you everyone for joining today. So first of all, I would like to thank Prerna because she was in the field and she's also not feeling quite well, but I must admire, we should, like she said, no, we should definitely do it. And she insisted that we should proceed with this talk, and I'm really grateful on behalf of Vidhi. So let me just tell you about a little bit of Vidhi. So Vidhi is a policy think tank based in Delhi, and we do research on laws and policies. And our climate ecosystem team works on the understanding and analyzing the laws and policies related to wildlife and ecosystems. It's a new team, and you can say the intention of the team is to make these laws more eco-centric. So I won't take much time, but I will like to summarize the major amendments to set a context of this conversation. And then we will also be taking questions from audience after we have this conversation. And you can put your questions in chat box, or you can raise hand and we can take questions orally as well. So let me just quickly go through the major amendments in this Wildlife Protection Act. So one major addition is this, addition of a chapter on CITES. So this basically regulates the international trade of certain species, and which India is party to, and party for very long. And now in the act itself, one of the mandate of the CITES is to integrate the CITES obligation under domestic law in some way. We can do it through new law, or we can amend the existing law. That is one commendable effort, but we also had some, we have highlighted some issues which you can go through our submission. It is available online for the chapter on CITES. So it is a little bit technical, but there's very mechanical kind of comments, what should be and what should not be. Now, the other significant amendment, there are 2-3 very significant amendments to it. One is this creation of standing committees on State Board of Wildlife, similar to what exists for National Board of Wildlife. So it basically delegates the power of National Board of Wildlife to the Standing Committee. Now it is being repeated for the State Board of Wildlife. So that will come later. The other amendment has been the shuffling of schedules. So there were 4 main schedules for animals, and there were one schedule for specified plants protected under this act. So total there were 6 schedules, and one schedule was for these animals and vermin. That also I will discuss later on. Right now they have reduced it to 4 schedules. So 2 are for animals, and 1 is for the plant species, and 1 is for these animals listed in the CITES. So it is one addition, and there are removal of certain schedules for that. There are also some concerns raised by conservationists about the ambiguities related to certain amendments.
I'm sorry, please excuse me. Yeah. It's very difficult to hear you clearly. If you don't mind to speak a little bit louder or get closer to the mic or something.
Yeah.
Because,
sure.
Otherwise, I'm not doing my job properly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, and the other like amendments in this, the proposed amendments in this law is the concerns shared by conservationists about the ambiguities in the proposed changes. For example, there are changes in the way elephants could be transported. So which was previously it was more stricter. Now the language, by language it appears that it is relaxed, and that we have also highlighted in our submission. There is one more amendment to this, section 29, which actually exempts certain bona fide and uses like drinking water for the local community, which is good. But also this leaves some ambiguities. This we will definitely be discussing in our this conversation with Prerna. And there are many more like missed opportunities, which there are. So this is all the changes which happened, but there are also certain things which could have been improved, and we expected that this act should have been addressed those concerns. But this, it is more like shuffling things and changing this section, that section. So it is not really an improvement as per we understand. So I will just go to Prerna, because Prerna, apart from being a conservationist, she's also an author. She's a wildlife historian. She has been part of National Board of Wildlife, and she has been actively we really draw inspiration from her work. And I'm really glad she's here and she can share her insight. So before Prerna, we jump into the amendments. Why don't you just, share to understand amendments, we must understand why this act exists and why it is important and what it actually does and whether it has been successful in what his actually intention was, and whether there are certain changes with time we needed to address those changes. So basically, just to set the stage, you can just explain, the intention and background under which conditions this act was came, and what happened since then. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak on a subject that I am very passionate about and is central to my life. And thanks also for that very kind introduction. I see, the genesis of the Wildlife Protection Act in 1972 is largely owing to the crisis that wildlife and forests faced at that time. That was in the early 60s. So we had state acts. Every state had a different act. So it was, there was no umbrella act to protect wildlife. Also, we are looking at a period post independence where wildlife was not a priority. And there was huge destruction of forests for industry, for dams. A new nation was born and it was being built. And then, of course, you had shikar, not just by royalty, but it was also tourism. Now how people come to see tigers, people came to bag tigers as trophies. So we were in a situation where the tiger was in a very precarious state. As most of us know, you had the great Indian bustard, which was almost on the brink. It still is. It's in a worse position now. The cheetah was extinct, and that was other species like crocodiles, gharials, everything was and we had a prime minister who was very passionate about wildlife, which was Indira Gandhi. And this thinking was that we need a central legislation to protect wildlife, which at that point had no protection. And remember, at that time, we didn't, it wasn't what we call, wildlife wasn't a concurrent subject. It was a state subject. What we have now is that both center and the state are responsible for wildlife, right? At that time, it was a state subject. So bringing a central law that would govern states on issues like wildlife was quite a radical thing. And Indira Gandhi wrote to all the states personally, saying that, and this is important, that wildlife is not a political issue. I'm writing to you, to request you to accept this law and it's not a political issue. And that is how the Wildlife Protection Act was born. And for all its, for all its should we say, omissions or some certain concerns, it was and continues to be one of the strongest laws globally to conserve wildlife, and certainly was a landmark event in wildlife conservation in India and globally. It has protected, along with other measures like Project Tiger. There was a Project Crocodile, which you know of. There were other many, hunting was banned, but the Wildlife Protection Act has been central. It's been the bedrock of conservation. It created, it enabled the creation of national parks and sanctuaries. It banned hunting, and it's not only legal. It also showed what the country's intent was, that wildlife is not, it's not a commodity. It's a life, in the sense that you were not, as many countries do, wildlife was not trophy, wildlife was not for commercial use. Wildlife was meant to be protected and conserved, and in sync with our ethos culturally. And to me, one is the legal aspect, and how that intent of the government, that of bringing it in sync also with the Constitution, which Article 21, which asks citizens to conserve wildlife. So I think any change in this act, therefore, is of great import, any change, because this has been the bedrock of conservation in India. And anything will significantly impact the direction of conservation in the future. So it has to be very seriously taken. And that's something I would like to emphasize. Yeah, that's what I would like to say about the one thing I would like to say is, while the intent is very good, unfortunately, we are very good at bypassing laws also, making good laws and bypassing good laws. But having said that, I would say that it as a conservationist, it's something that has, that I see in practice as protecting wildlife day in and day out. Yeah.
Thank you, Prerna. That was quite insightful. So you mentioned about that one thing is political will, and this to sync with the constitutional mandate. So this Article 48A, if I'm right, that imposed the obligation on the states to protect their forest and wildlife, specifically said wildlife, because there were many interpretation which said constitution mein wildlife and environment is not there. So I think that amendment was as a result of this WP. After 3-4 years, this amendment was inserted. That showed the intent of the government that time. But also, as you said, any law, good or bad, it also depends on the implementation. We have seen as a part of Vidhi, we have done reports on EIA, on this Public Liability Insurance Act. And we have seen everywhere, when you take the example of judgments, Supreme Court judgments, major judgments, they are not implemented for not only years, decades, 20-30 years, this is not implemented on ground. That brings me to the question that, now every law has some regulatory authority. They have some executives to, who actually, are the bridge between the law and how it affects the, actual conservation. And WPA has been successful because there have been members who are really strong and as a part of these boards, National Board of Wildlife. So it is not only the act, it was also the people who are part of the board, and they play a very important role how to do this thing. So in the present act, there is a National Board of Wildlife, which is chaired by the Prime Minister. And there is a State Board of Wildlife, which is chaired by the Chief Minister. And there are many concerns that in last several years, not a single meeting of National Board of Wildlife has taken place. On the other side, if I see legally, I don't see much problem here, because there is a standing committee of National Board of Wildlife, which is which the original board can delegate the powers to meet. And we also understand that having too long committees can also affect the decision making. So smaller committees works better. And so that is what I understand as a when I see the law itself and the kind of amendments. And now in this amendment, they have also created this standing committee of State Board of Wildlife. Now the thing is, the original act says there are long list of people who will be member of it, representing different views of the thing. When there is standing committee, the vice chairperson, who is the Minister of Environment for the center, the National Board of Wildlife, and the Minister of Forest for the state. Under this proposed amendment, they have said the vice chairperson, who is the Minister of Forest for the state, he will nominate, I think, 8 to 10 members as a standing committee of State Board of Wildlife. But this is something new. So because you have been part of both State Board of Wildlife and National Board of Wildlife, and in your book, Managing, you have also mentioned some incidences, how it functions. So maybe you are the best person to take us through why this standing committee concept as such, maybe good or bad, that I understand, but you may throw some light. And if this State Board of Wildlife has these standing committees, then what could be the potential impact on the decision making and kind of protection we have till now?
Good question. Thanks, Deboditya. To me, this is one of the most serious concerns in the Act, in the amendment bill. You are right. The National Board of Wildlife is a fairly cumbersome 47-member board. And just to briefly tell the audience, the board has many functions, most of which are to do with conservation of wildlife, advise the government on policy issues like illegal wildlife trade, how to counter it, creation of protected areas, status of wildlife in the country, etc., etc. One of its mandate is how to regulate and to understand the impact of development activities on protected areas. Unfortunately, what has happened is that the only function that it seems to concern itself with is not the regularization of, or not to regulate the damaging activities, but to clear the damaging activities. There is a distinction between the two. Its mandate is to understand impact and regulate. But what we see as happening is that it's become a clearance committee. That apart, yes, a standing committee was, there was an amendment which brought about the standing committee, perhaps because the National Board wasn't meeting as regularly as it did during the times of when Karan Singh was its chair, and Indira Gandhi used to regularly hold meetings, and then Rajiv Gandhi, because there was a lot of political will to drive wildlife conservation. See, but what happens when a full board meets, it discusses issues like policy, it discusses issues like new protected areas, it discusses issues like we need a new wildlife wing, it discusses issues like protection of habitats and corridors, not only serve as a clearance committee, which has become, so if you look at the fall of the National Board of Wildlife, you'll clearly see that once the standing committee came into existence, the National Board started meeting lesser and lesser and lesser. Policy issues started becoming less and less important, and the time that they were discussed or given to them. And it has been a regular battle of members, at least, over the years, that we give more time, devote our energies to conservation issues, at least till recent times. Unfortunately, hasn't happened. The other concern of a standing committee is it's different, and that is my concern with state boards. There are lots of issues with the functioning of state boards currently, and I can speak for, have a separate session on it, on how state boards are also largely focusing on clearances, how the manner of their functioning. Having said that, you have meetings where there is a chief minister who's chairing it. It means that any decision taken is immediately taken on board. Any decision taken. As for example, I even remember I think in Jharkhand or some such state, there was an issue of Palamu Tiger Reserve being very poorly staffed, and then you have those discussions, and it comes to the attention of the chief minister immediately, not go through a forest minister. Whereas, and if the way the political system works, the forest minister will always be will carry less weight then say a industries minister or the finance minister or the mining minister for mining or transport, etc., who will want their projects in wildlife areas. So a decision taken by the standing committee with a forest minister as chair will not be able to push, say, we need more funding for, because the staff is less, or because we are, the tiger reserves and protected areas have not been funded for the last 6 months, or that this expansion of a highway through so-and-so national park is really, really damaging. But when a chief minister takes that decision, the bureaucracy and the everything moves into action immediately. It is not relegated somewhere, and it's not, it carries much more weight. There is no other body for wildlife where you have the head of a state chairing something or being part of something which is, and I think it's very, very critical that we retain that and not make it like this. Now the State Board for Wildlife meet once in 6 years, which hasn't happened till date with the National Board of Wildlife. I think that's a very, very serious concern. It will dilute us state boards of wildlife, and many state boards have taken good decisions. Maharashtra of late, recently 10 conservation reserves have been declared in Maharashtra. They have a state wildlife action plan, which are proactive moves by the state. Karnataka took a decision to expand its protected area network. This won't happen if the chief minister is not chairing it, if only the forest minister is chairing it. To me, that's a very major concern.
Yeah, certainly, and you have explained it very well. And what I can understand is the original act used have this provision that it has to be cleared from the chief minister, then prime minister, and then the clearance will be granted. So now we have both the ministers absent if this thing comes. So it will take in only with the standing committees. So it doesn't have this additional like responsibility which is given importance to it. So we're taking it casually. That's the approach. I think that is what we can see it.
Yeah, it will again become a diluted body, and I mean, wildlife is increasingly, we are in the age of sixth extinction. We are in the age of climate crisis. And we are at a point where our wildlife is, we had a crisis point in 72. I think we have a similar crisis point, and such damages are irreversible. Extinction is forever, and we are seeing local extinctions. We need political will. We need, wildlife to be part of the mainstream. We need heads of state to be concerned, or at least a policy. This is one body, both the national board and the state board, which concerns itself with wildlife. One body. Yeah. So we cannot. And yes, the national board hasn't met for 6 years. I always counter and say, it's a terrible thing, but at the same time, it cannot move away from its mandate of wildlife conservation. So any meeting that is held has to keep that central to, and a standing committee is moving away from its central mission. And that's the way states are going to go. That's the road that the states are going to take with this step, is what I fear.
Thank you. So now I move to the next query I have. So that is, we have also mentioned and this concern has been raised by many people, that there was this is regarding elephant transport. So we understand elephant is part of cultural heritage, it is seen in many temples, and a lot of people have livelihoods dependent on elephant. Said so, I think there was already a provision for elephant transportation of any animal. And under the present act, it is the mandate that if you are transferring elephant or transporting, these two things are different. Transfer, maybe, I don't know if this definition is not clear, but transfer maybe means that suppose I want to transfer the animal from UP to Karnataka. So I have 3-4 states in between. But transportation may be where it is being transported. So Karnataka is the transporter state. So that is what I assume, I'm assuming it. Now, in the present act, it clearly says that the person who is doing it, transferring or transporting, and they have to inform, first they have to take permission. Without permission, they cannot do it. And if they have permission from the state authorities, they have to inform the respective state where this transfer or transport is affected. This song is there. It is affected in this state. So that means all the chief wildlife wardens, they have to be informed. So if I start from UP, if I cross MP, Chhattisgarh or whatever state, I have to inform each of the chief wildlife officers, my elephant is coming. Now in the amendment, they have a very, they have mentioned, they have actually amended it, and they say this thing will not apply to elephants which they already have a permission to do that. Now, it may be like, I can understand it may be because to stop harassment of people which may be faced by state, but it is not clear like from which state and where it is going. This is completely silent on this. So that also leads me to assume like, permission from whom and whom to inform, whether I should inform the transfer state or I should inform the transporting state. There are a lot of ambiguities. And without knowing what is those, like, impact of it. So maybe you can share what you feel about that particular amendment of that section 43.
Such a retrograde move. How do we see? So I'll just try and simplify this. Yes, as you say earlier, it was very clear that the Wildlife Protection Act specifically prohibits trade in wild animals, including captive and wild elephants. So that I think is section 40. So it prohibited any person from acquiring, receiving, keeping in one's control, custody or possession, sell, offer for sale or otherwise transfer or transport any animals specified in Schedule 1 or Part 2 of Schedule 2. Essentially, it was a blanket ban on sale, transport, receiving, keeping, offer of sale also. Now, you exempt the elephant from this and put a very vague thing, as you say, that you need to take permission from the state. Which state? We don't know. Now, the elephant is a Schedule 1 species. Its population has fallen. Its habitat is decimated hugely. I can go into figures, but I'm not going to go down that route now. Its corridors are being decimated. Its land is not protected. 2/3 of the habitat is not protected. It is our national heritage animal. We apparently worship it as Ganesha. We do worship it, but somehow, in our action, in our acts, we are not true to our mandate to protect it. And this is a horrifying dilution in my, as far as I'm concerned, because it gives you this huge loophole to trade in elephants, to commercially trade in elephants. Elephant is a very intelligent species, and to allow for this, a wild animal, to allow its commercial sale is bad from the, it endangers our wild populations. And also it's bad from the welfare perspective of captive elephants. Because you now have a very vague provisions regarding its commercial trade and giving you, now remember what I said earlier, we have good laws, its implementation is poor. We bypass it, and this gives you all the opportunity to do so. Even within the current provisions, we wouldn't have imagined it, but while caught elephants are being smuggled from Assam and from other, as recently as last year, or was it the year before? There was a racket of 200 elephants, and I would imagine that, these huge creatures, it would be difficult to smuggle them, but this happens. And we are now giving them all the opportunity to do so. This has to go. And we need to move away, however politically difficult it is. We need to move away from having captive elephants, allowing for captivity of a wild species that we protect under Schedule 1. Instead, we are now moving in the opposite direction. So to me, this is potentially harmful in terms of both captive elephant welfare and can potentially lead to declines and trade of wild caught elephants. So population declines is a huge concern when the elephant faces so many other threats. Yeah, I think that's...
Thank you. So now I have one more concern about this Section 29 amendment. So basically, anything to do with any destruction in sanctuary, like, you have to take permission from National Board of Wildlife. That is a mandate which has been there, and it was in the present act is there that livestock grazing and movement of livestock is permitted under certain sections, and they should not be regulated. But we have also seen that in certain areas where it it outruns its carrying capacity. Even this livestock grazing have also hampered its competition. So there needed a regulation certain places, like may not over every places. But now I think there is one more addition to this exemption. It says that bona fide use and some drinking water will be exempted. And they have not this amendment is not clear what is bona fide and use will be, and drinking water can be for anything. And this they have submitted this thing that you have to also clarify. You have to list what bona fide means. So so can you throw some light in your experience? Like, we have been to many places, and how this regulation is important, and what can be the of course we all believe in people who are living in community. They should have the first right. But there are also instances where it is misused. Very few, but this exceptions has been very large. We have seen animals wiped out from places. So any comments on that?
Again, I find this, so this says bona fide use of drinking and household water by local communities. Now, the intent might be good. And yes, we understand that, our protected areas, we have about nearly 5 million, maybe more people in and around our protected areas, which are only 5% of India, which is for half of the global average of 10%. So we have to remember that our protected areas are very, very stressed. My concern here now, as a member of the National Board and State Board, I can tell you with a guarantee, even with the most protective and most committed of members, all drinking water proposals were granted. I can't remember, and I've gone through minutes of hundreds of, almost all meetings. I think drinking water proposals are always cleared, more or less. There may be the odd exception. But my concern, so I think you can't just say that, give a blanket that they can be allowed. Remember, there are sanctuaries like Chambal Sanctuary, which is one of the few freshwater river sanctuary, which has critically endangered species like the gharial. You have dolphins, far more endangered than tigers. Gharial, we have only about 200 adult population, breeding adult population. And these are the last stretches where they survive. And during our time also, there were drinking water proposals, and these drinking waters are not ke ek pipe laga diya. That it gives us a very theek hai, 100 log hain, ya 250 logon ka village hai, or whatever. It's not like that. It's not, the consumption is, you would have a huge kind of a small dam and, the drinking water, which was for drinking water. And it was a major concern because these areas are also under a lot of pressure for other uses, increasingly for industrial uses, illegal extraction of water. So with withdrawing of an overall regulation is very, very troubling. My main concern here is how this can be abused and misused. That you will say it's a drinking water project, and on that, as for example, let's take the Char Dham highway, which is a double rain highway through one of the, the fragile Himalayan ecosystem. Lot of concerns. The EIA was bypassed by breaking that 900 odd kilometers national highway through sanctuaries and the Himalayan ecosystem into small segments, so that it would bypass the regulatory environment regulation procedure. And this is my concern. Drinking water project hai, and you would disguise other uses as a drinking water project. Unfortunately, it's a practice. And I think here we need to take the precautionary principle. Yes, always have a sympathetic, and I can, we do have a sympathetic view of drinking water proposals. Maybe, but totally allowing it, I would take it. It's a concern. It's a concern because it can be misused, and our protected areas are very, very stressed, and these are, these are watersheds. These are used by wildlife, and these contain some of are very, very critically endangered wildlife, and wildlife which we don't think of, don't consider: turtles, dolphins, crocodilian species, fish, aquatic bird life. So I think we need to be a little cautious with this one, while keeping the needs of the communities also in mind. Yeah,
absolutely. So basically, what we have seen and doing our research also, that this kind of there are good intentions in the act, but how it translates in the ground, that matters the most. We have seen now most of dams, they say multi-purpose project. They don't mention power project. And they say that, it is benefit for the local people. Ultimately, the water goes to thermal parts. And we have seen in very water-starved areas. So this kind of thing, they're drinking water. They take the proposal, they say it is drinking water proposal. And then, so I think this is a perspective which we must look at it. The law which is say it is very good, but it's always misused. In the hindsight, we have seen this. Now, my last question, and then we will take questions from people and we can discuss more, missed opportunities. Last question is about this, reshuffling of schedules. And there's one more corrective question. So before that, I will just outline, how the schedule has been changed. So previously there are 4 main schedules for animals, like mostly wild mammals, and animals means everything, and mammals, birds, and fishes. They also are animals, animal kingdom. So usually people think animal means all the mammals. It is not like that. And there was schedule 5, which was used to call vermin. I will come to that. And schedule 6 was for species of plants. And schedule 5 was this, of course, this vermin thing. So now they have reduced this thing, these 4 main schedules to just 2. One is the schedule 1, which is the highest protection. Good thing, there is addition of 1 animal in schedule 1. This is the hog deer. So I think hog deer is always is very elusive, and it's a good addition, but only 1 species has been added to the schedule 1. That is the main takeaway here. And schedule 2, all the animals which were in schedule 2, 3, 4, they have all clubbed together in schedule 2. Now, schedule 3 is something which is good because there were originally 6 or 7 plant species. Now it is 18. This schedule 3, new addition. That means in wildlife, they have also given some importance to the plants. Though I think 18 plants is much, much less because it has so much plant species and very localized plants. They should have given it more importance. And schedule 4 is listing of the species under the CITES convention. It is also good. Now, if we compare with the present act, it is nothing more deviation. So I will see, if I compare with the present act, it is actually a better version of the schedule. It's more streamlined. But my problem is, in the schedule of vermin, there are hardly 3-4 animals which are usually declared as vermin. Maybe nilgai is one of the things, wild boar. And it's also problematic how they declare it. There are misuse of that provision. They promotes hunting, all this thing. Now, okay, fine. You have kept this provision of vermin. Now, vermin term itself is problematic. So we also suggested that this term vermin is derogatory. Although, there should be some alternate term, and there's no need of term actually for such thing. That is something we can discuss separately. And then, in this schedule 2, I think we have also mentioned there are 41 mammals, and there's a huge list of animals which enables the center to declare as vermin. So I don't know, even 1% of that has been ever declared as vermin. And in the situation where we have no mandate in the law, the process to follow to declare species as a vermin or problem animal, there is no liability fixed. Who will be responsible if something goes wrong? So in that situation, I expected this law to be more improved version of the present regulation. And this number of animals, huge number, is really, I'm surprised that why they have kept. I think I'm just using the number which I mentioned: 41 mammals, 864 birds, 12 reptiles, 5 amphibians, 58 insects, 14 mollusks, 10 sponges, which may be declared as vermin by the central government. It is same like what is in present act and the amendment. So here I'm talking about the missed opportunity. I'm starting discussion that how this reshuffling of schedule and vermin, they could have done something much useful, because other states, they do it very ad hoc way. So sometimes they declare the vermin for an entire state. It is not required to declare an animal in entire state as vermin. So this kind of anomalies we have observed. So please share your opinion on that. Like what could have been the better version of it?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some tech issues. Just a second. Yeah. You're very right, and you have sort of outlined my concerns about this. What I will just briefly say is that what is one of the most problematic issues with this amendment bill is that it lacks any scientific basis or rigor, and that is so pronounced in these issues concerning, and I hate using the word vermin, and also how the schedules have been listed. So yes, it does appear that only one animal, as you say, has benefited by inclusion in Schedule 1. And we have increasingly rare species like jackals, fox, hyena, martens, and endless and lot of others, which needed to be included in Schedule 1, but have not been done. So my first concern here is please, in a law that is meant for wildlife conservation, drop the use of terms such as vermin, which are so derogatory, as you say, so negative. And two, on what basis, A, do you declare them vermin? B, on what basis are the schedules being, say a jackal has been given Schedule 2 or whatever B, or hyena is in Schedule 2. There are studies which show that their populations are declining. So I think this calls for very, very rigorous exercise, calling expertise, taking into account the expertise available, the scientific studies, estimates available. There are new species which have come, which are being there. Where are they represented? You have given very startling figures. What I would like to point out here is that while there is, at least because mammals are, what most of us are concerned with or perceive as animals, as you say, but very poorly represented are plants, insects, which make the world go round, as we all recently have been reading, amphibians, reptiles, and even classes of mammals such as bats or rodent species. Now, bats have traditionally been considered pests, but we know for a fact many of them are severely endangered and their populations restricted to like one cave in certain species. And we know that they play a critical role in the ecosystem as pollinators, etc. Not pollinators, pest controls. When the Wildlife Protection Act was drafted in 1972, a lot of these science did not exist. And it was, done. Now we have advanced so much in terms of what we know about the status of these species, and all of that should have been reflected in the Act, which it isn't. Then on what basis do you declare, again, that horrible word, vermin? There is, and that needs to be, what is the process? On what basis is it declared? For what area? You cannot, as you say, you cannot for an entire state. Goa, for instance, declared A, the national bird vermin, and B, the Gaur, its state bird as vermin at one point. And there was a huge outcry, and fortunately that was withdrawn. But what was the basis? And why the entire state? I mean, these are things that is a huge, as you say, a missed opportunity. And we are now in a situation of, yes, like potentially having more species to be declared as vermin or not included in the Act. Only 400, we have about 1,300 birds, out of which 450 odd are not represented in any schedule at all, including endemic species. So, I mean, why? And I'll just move on to missed opportunities, if that's okay, since we are kind of short on time. So quickly, I would like to say, there are a lot of uncovered ground in the existing act that all of us as conservationists and many the community, so to speak, has repeatedly brought up. What is part of, currently we protect wildlife through protected areas and then again through scheduling listing them in schedules, which I've already said is a flawed process. Then protected areas, as I said, only 5% of India, and very stressed, effectively 2% of India. A lot of our wildlife, including tigers, including elephants, including leopards, wolves, hyenas, jackals, bears, name it. I'm not even going to the birds like critically endangered birds like GIB, lesser floricans, so are outside our protected areas. So where is there any, what would have been needed here is that we look at, some kind of a regulation or graded protection outside of protected areas, as Vidhi pointed out, perhaps a wildlife regulatory authority or a wildlife conservation authority on the lines of NTCA. We should have been thinking about protection, graded protection, at least not allowing for damaging projects in key elephant, bear corridors, tiger corridors, important ecological habitats. We should have, thought of other ways of protection where the government cannot, but communities can, or even private conservancies. So these are things that were very desperately needed. I think that was one key missed opportunity that we have lost. And another is there are ecosystems beyond what is traditionally defined as forests. We have riverine, montane, deserts, grasslands, arid lands, coastal ecosystems, mangroves, marshes, coral reefs. Where are they in our Wildlife Protection Act? These are, and mangroves and grasslands actually sequester more carbon than forests, and they are critical to fight our climate crisis. So, all of this should have been reflected. So it's a huge missed opportunity. And I cannot reiterate this more, that any change to the Wildlife Protection Act should only be to strengthen the act, the current day and age. It is in a time of when we don't have political will for conservation, and where our wildlife is, where we are as far as climate crisis is concerned, we need a strong law, and we cannot afford to dilute it. Any change should only be to strengthen the law. And that's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Prerna. And that was really very insightful. So I just want to add a couple of comments on what you said. One thing is that how we define forest, that is also always problematic. And apart from the FSI report that I'm not commenting here because we are discussing wildlife, but as a conservationist scientist, we always believe that forest actually means, the term forest comes from the thing that anything which is beyond settlement. So anything originally forests were actually grasslands. And now we have eventually developed the definition that forest means dense wooded area. It is not the thing. And maybe in the dense forest, you may not find any wildlife because they all need open areas. So there are certain things that you have to develop consciousness. Also, one question, follow-up question to this. You said that we need beyond law, like strong laws. That also brings to the financing aspect and the overall development agenda of the government. So very recently, the budget came, and every year I go through the budget, and there is a organization which organizes talks, and I'm part of that. So we have been discussing that, Ministry of Environment, forget Ministry of Environment, even other funds for Project Tiger and all these things, they have been either same or reduced. And, and the autonomous institutions like WII, the only government funded, independent institution, the funding has been reduced. And, this kind of things have been there. ICFRI or IIFM, who actually does the research. Now there is a push for single window clearance also. That means they are going to do. So what do you think? How do you see the future? Then we'll take the questions. How do you see the future and how to deal with this kind of amendments, and from where the change will come? This amendment doesn't talk about community-based conservation. Plus, there is a push for this single window clearance and dilutions of. You have seen this dilution of the Biological Diversity Act, where it has opened up for foreign companies. If you see the actual meaning of those things, So all these laws have impact on wildlife, Forest Act, Biodiversity Act, even kind of new laws which are there. There's Ministry of Cooperation now. And there's a huge fund, 900 crores for just that ministry, like develop cooperation. So I think this wildlife is the least priority. So how do you see going forward, and how can we, if you want to suggest anything to the audience, to deal with it?
It's a difficult question. Not difficult, but difficult answer rather. It's a very, very bad scenario. It's very difficult to retain hope. I remember one of our very dear colleagues actually telling me it's a lost battle, and I said, yes, it is, but that doesn't mean we give up fighting, right? Yes, every move, not just the acts you mentioned, definitely those, but even the Forest Conservation Act, Coastal Regulation Zone, the wetlands, wetland management rules, all of them have only been diluted. And these are not, these not just the act themselves, but also the rules that govern them. So every day is a new law. Every day is a new law. The single window clearance, the star system for states, more and more, environment impact EIA 2020 that was proposed. It's endless. It's just endless. And not just these laws, but also things like the mining, the rules that govern mining, rules that govern transport and highways. So you are allowing for no environment oversight or scrutiny on areas close to borders, 100 kilometers from borders. Well, we must remember there are most biodiverse areas, and also there are water towers. These are very critical to us in the Himalayan ecosystem. So you cannot have everything. And I do recall proposing through our national board only, or at some point, that any law which impacts wildlife, and to me that means everything. Any development activity, but or otherwise, even any law which is of tribal welfare, any law which is for industry, construction, highways, mining, will have an impact on wildlife. And our proposal was that any such, this was intended earlier, but somehow lost in the conversation, should go through the National Board for Wildlife for its impact on wildlife, and their inputs should be taken into consideration. So, and that any project, when it is planned, should incorporate wildlife at its inception stages. Not ke wo road yahan tak aa gaya century ke is taraf aur is taraf, and then you come to it and itna expenditure to ho gaya hai, to ab to clearance ho jana chahiye. That's at the last minute you drop it at the national board or state board's door. So these are I don't even know. I've sort of lost track of what I'm saying, because it's
no, it absolutely,
it's heartburn actually. But I think what is the need of the hour is for people to be more aware of what is happening. Because it's not just, even when I read newspapers, wildlife activists are concerned. Why only wildlife activists are concerned? Why isn't the general public concerned when you're losing Aravalli biodiversity right at your doorstep, or there's pollution, right at your doorstep? Why is it only that environmentalists are concerned? And unless it becomes a voting issue, nothing's going to happen. Unless it becomes, and environment impacts all of us. If we lose elephants in a, somewhere, it means that our forests are poorer. If we are losing, so everything is, and when people come and ask me, what can we do? We are nothing. All of us are nothing in that sense. And all of us are very powerful. So empower yourself what is happening, and concern yourself with, if not larger issues, at least to a problem that's at your doorstep. I think that, to me, that is the key, more than however important taking, paper straws or whatever, using a steel straw and a cloth bag might be. I think political action is the need of the hour. It's a very difficult time for wildlife and conservation, and that impacts each and every one of us.
Yeah, it all comes down to
ultimately. I don't know if I have addressed your question, but I kind of lost.
No, absolutely. Like, it is very meaningful thing. So I will just take questions. We have a couple of questions. So first, I will take this question about this. What is the advantage of a tiger reserve over national parks and sanctuaries? And why are our national parks and sanctuaries renamed as tiger reserves?
Quick question, quick answer.
Yeah.
A tiger reserve is not a legal entity. A tiger reserve might have, so say for example, Tadoba Tiger Reserve. It has the Tadoba National Park. It has Andhari Wildlife Sanctuary. It has some buffer. It has areas which are reserve forests, and some of which within it might be private lands. There will be villages inside, but it is all a tiger reserve. It is an administrative entity. What is a statute? What is statutory within it is the critical tiger habitat, which might be, as far as Tadoba is concerned, Andhari Wildlife Sanctuary and Tadoba National Park, which would be, say, about a third of the reserve. I'm just giving an example, and the figures are not accurate. But what a tiger reserve will do, the critical tiger habitat is specified in the law. The national park and the sanctuary are specified in the law. The tiger reserve is an administrative entity, but it will bring in funding and technical expertise from the center. It will bring in also, in speaking as a conservationist, it helps when you say, "Arey, ye project so and so tiger reserve mein hai." Even though the maximum protection that the law applies is to a national park. But because the project, tiger is an entity, NTCA is an entity, the tiger is a national animal, etc., that gives it. So, that's the answer to your question.
So there's one follow-up question from Samir. So he wants to know that, is that the legal framework only catches up with the popular or political understanding of the science around forests and wildlife? And what's broken in a bigger way? Do we as a nation even understand why it is important to us? And what drives these amendments?
So what should be driving these amendments is understanding the lacunae and how these are to be addressed. There needs to be a process that these are the lacunae. Things change over time. We are seeing challenges today which didn't exist earlier. We have knowledge today which didn't exist earlier. So our laws should be responsive to that. But yes, you're right. What drives them is political setup or political or populist. Many laws is vote politics, or many amendments is vote politics, or even driven by the big corporate concerns, any dilutions or amendments. So it need not be that the entire law is amended, So the rules are amended, and most of us remain unaware of what's happening every day on a day-to-day through basis within the corridors of power. So yes, it is these that drive these changes largely. And as I said earlier, they lack it's not a transparent process. It's not a consultative process. It's not even a rigorous science-based or assessed process taking in, expertise of concerned scientists or researchers or conservationists or, I don't know. So do we as a nation even understand why that's important to us? I think I kind of addressed that. Sadly, it's yet to be a political issue. I'm very glad to see that Goa, there's a very vibrant citizen movement, and they have proposed a green manifesto, which is totally a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Prerna. So we have already 5 p.m., but we will take one more question. So there are a couple of questions on climate change. So I don't think this we can address this thing in this talk because we're talking here wildlife. So COP and all these things, like you can separately talk to Prerna about those things. So there's one question on, like, can you please shed more light on regulating role of NBWL and SBWL? So, yeah.
So as I said, the NBWL and the SBWL is the highest, NBWL at the national level, the state, the SBWL at the state level. It's the highest policy making and body on wildlife, not just a high level, but the only high level body. And as I said, it has a lot of functions, one of which is to assess projects, the impact of projects, whether they be development, whether they be infrastructure, industry, mining, or something like drinking water proposal on wildlife habitats. And this has been strengthened by various High Court and Supreme Court orders, which now say that any proposal which requires any development project proposal, activity, etc., which requires an EIA, etc., within a protected area, wildlife sanctuary, national park, conservation reserve, and its eco-sensitive zone, it's defined eco-sensitive zone, must go through first the State Board of Wildlife. If it is cleared by the State Board of Wildlife, it will go to the National Board of Wildlife. Debaditya wants to have a cement plant. Sorry, Debaditya, I know you don't. Around, say within, on the fringes of a sanctuary in Rajasthan. It goes to the State Board, which says, ideally does a site visit, understand its concerns, what can be the impact, speak to the people, speak to experts, comes back with the report, they deliberate on it. If they, God forbid, they agree to it, even in spite of its impacts, it goes to the National Board for further scrutiny. It has independent experts precisely for that reason. So that is the regulating, and it's a safeguard to protect these areas. The mandate is wildlife conservation. Unfortunately, what has happened is that it is believed that it is a stamp, thappa lagaya aur sab kuch jo bhi aata hai wo clear hua. I mean, I've been gathering courage to go through the minutes of the last NBWL meeting, which I think was 2-3 weeks back. All the projects have been cleared, except one which for some weird reason, everything. So now it has become that it facilitates clearances of these projects within protected areas. This is actually, if you go by the law, it is a very murky area, because it's in one sense illegal, because the law is very clear in saying that any project can only be allowed in a wildlife sanctuary or a national park if it is beneficial to wildlife. Now, please tell me, how will the Ken Betwa River Link project, which will impact 1/3 of the tiger reserve, drown a part of the core of the national park, Panna National Park, which has critically endangered vulture populations, tiger breeding populations, and host of other species. It's going to drown them. It will submerge them. This was passed by the State Board amidst a lot of protests and dissent. It was passed by the National Board, bindas, and how can anybody please tell me how it will benefit wildlife? If I look at the minutes of the meeting, I do not think any project that I see will benefit wildlife. So is that legal? Is something I don't think so. Also, remember, each decision of the National Board can be taken up. That's something that we used to say when we were expected to pass proposals, and we were like, no, this is too damaging to wildlife. We are answerable. As a National Board member, we are answerable. We can be taken to court for our decisions. So we need an active civil society who actually questions the actions of the state board and national board on these issues. I hope I've been clear.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, Prerna. So when, like, as you, like, I can summarize what you said, like, first there should be political will. Second, to counter it, there should be a public will to do that. And when the institution is like that, and there are examples where due to public protests, protests had been reversed, and this Mumbai Metro and all these examples are there. Many projects have been stopped from Supreme Court and National Grid Tribunal. Though there are very few examples. If I take example, out of 100, maybe 5, 6 may have been done, but it does give us hope that our judiciary has stood, and I hope that it stays that way, because in India's environmental jurisprudence, the Supreme Court and courts have always stood to any kind of deviation from the mandate of Article 48A. The state should defend. So I think in the implementation, every mandate has been reversed. So state is not protecting wildlife. The State Board of Wildlife, National Board of Wildlife, they are, instead of benefiting the wildlife, they are clearing projects. So this is sad, but I think we have still hope, and people are doing their best, and I hope that continues that way. I can see some raised hands, but unfortunately, we are already out of time. And
one question I'm okay to take. If you want to take
there
one
is
question.
one raised hand, so I will just allow the person to speak.
Yes, Saurabh, can.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah,
yes,
quickly, quick question.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, I'll be speaking in Hindi if I may.
जी, बिल्कुल, बोलिए.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, thanks a lot for giving us the real insights. Ma'am, आपको हम पवलगढ़ के टाइम से जानते हैं, ma'am. And you have been fighting like a crusader. मैम एक दो वैलिड थोड़े कंसर्न्स ये हैं कि आप प्लीज बताएंगे कि परसुइंग एनवायरमेंटल लॉ एज अ करियर इन इंडिया क्या होगा, एंड व्हाट आर द मेजर चैलेंजेस टू फेस एज एन एस्पायरिंग लॉयर, एंड प्लीज बी ऑनेस्ट एज ऑलवेज लाइक इन योर बुक वैनिशिंग इंडिया.
मैं पहले देवादित्य को बोलूंगी, आप बताएं, फिर उसके बाद मैं बताती हूँ.
See, right, I will just say, this like Prerna is not a lawyer, and I am not a lawyer. So I think for environmentalism, like degrees don't matter. Like I think most of the environmentalists, they don't have degree in environmental science. They are not lawyer. So people on ground who are very much determined, and like you have like sympathy for the things going wrong around them. They can use their energy and their thing, and expertise can be developed. It's not, and in India, anyone can file a petition to Supreme Court or any court, and they can argue themselves. So a lawyer can facilitate, of course. So for me, I think if you're doing lawyer, and because you're doing as a you want to serve the environment, I think this is absolutely the best thing one can do. To pursue law as a profession to serve the environment. I think your future is very bright. Thank you.
So one question.
हाँ बोलो.
Yes, please ma'am.
नहीं, मैं थोड़ा ऐड करना चाहूंगी. बिल्कुल ठीक बोला उन्होंने. एज अ कंजर्वेशनिस्ट मैं ये बोलती हूँ कि सिर्फ कंजर्वेशनिस्ट नहीं बचाएंगे वाइल्ड लाइफ. हमको हर फील्ड में लोग चाहिए. जर्नलिस्ट चाहिए, लॉयर चाहिए, पॉलिटिशियन चाहिए, कॉर्पोरेट जो माइनिंग कर रहा है उससे भी जाके हमको बात करनी है ना. और हमको हर एक फील्ड में अपनी अपनी जो स्किल्स देते हैं वाइल्ड लाइफ. लॉयर्स आर सो, आई मीन आई स्क्रैम्बल फॉर लॉयर्स ऑल द टाइम. सो it's a much required field environment, and I mean, but if you're looking in terms of, okay, is it lucrative? I'm sorry, no. Is it conservation? Is not. It's a commitment and a passion, and that. But having said that, ये इसका scope बढ़ने वाला है, and there are organizations which employ environment lawyers as well. There are studies in India, globally, and remember, the law is our key. I don't like to use the word weapon, but a key tool in conservation. तो इसकी जितनी मैं emphasize करूँ जरूरत, तो अगर आप इसको सोच रहे हैं तो please करिएगा.
Right, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
जी,
so are we done?
Yeah, so I think so. So already it's 5:10. So with this, I wish to conclude this session. It has been very wonderful session, and we have learned so many things from you. This personal experience which you bring as a part of National Bureau of Wildlife and also the different committees. It was very useful. I think I'm sure people who are attending and who will see on YouTube, and this talk will be uploaded on various platforms. It will be up by, I think, a couple of days on YouTube. It can be shared. If you have any questions, follow-up questions, do share. We will send it to Prerna and we'll be happy to answer that. And with this, I must thank Prerna for being here today. I know she is quite busy and she's also not well, but this is something like I'm really grateful to it. Also thank my colleague Deepa Padmar, who worked out with me on analyzing this WPA, and it is very well-researched submission we have submitted to Parliamentary Standing Committee. It was introduced in Parliament, but it was then referred to the Standing Committee. So that is how things are going on. But anyway, but we are good that Standing Committee asked for comments, and Prerna also sent her comments. So please read these comments from different organizations, because everyone has their own concerns, and this concerns is very much alarming. I also wish to thank Samir and Rainmatter Foundation for facilitating this entire talk, supporting our work. I wish to thank Arun and Preeti for helping us with the interpretation and in sign language. It is very much useful. Thank you very much. We're deeply thankful to you. And I also thank my colleague Richa and Maitri of our Vidhi communications team, who, despite being a Sunday, it is supposed to be a leisure day, but they have gone away out and to organize this talk. And I really thank every one of you for being present there. So please take care. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. And thanks a lot to Debaditya and your team, and Arun, Preeti, everyone, Samir. I'm sorry, I don't recall all their names, but I'm very, very grateful, Samir as well, for giving me this opportunity, and to each one of you for attending and listening to, listening to wildlife on your leisure day, listening to someone who's speaking for wildlife, all of us. And my wish is that you continue to care and be active. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.